I thought that after the nuns had answered all the questions last night, there'd be no more questions to ask. Okay. Box is full again. See what we've got here. The first question. Dear Ajahn, may I know, according to the words of the Buddha, how did he enter jhana? Is it by watching the breath alone or metta? At what level was he at the time he was only eating a grain of rice before the shepherd lady offered the food? Is jhana equivalent to stream indra? Jhana 2, jhana 3, jhana 4, arahat. Thank you very much for your teaching. Okay, first question. How did the Buddha enter the jhana? Is it by watching the breath alone or metta? Either way could work to get into a jhana, but there was one saying, this was Venerable Gopika Moggallana Sutta, and that was just a mistake, I did it on purpose. Gopika Moggallana, he was after the Buddha had passed away, and he was asking Venerable Ananda, who was the go-to monk at the time. He spent so much time with the Buddha, and they'd seen Venerable Ananda with the Buddha. So many people would go to him to ask any questions they needed answers to. And one of the questions was, what type of meditation did the Buddha teach? And what the Venerable Ananda replied, he's only ever taught 4 types of meditation. Those 4 types of meditation, this is what it says in those suttas. He said, only taught 4 types of meditation. First jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. That's what it says there. Sometimes people think, oh, that just jhanas is just one part of everything he taught. But that is what Venerable Ananda said. How you get there is something else. But exactly which ones did he really teach others? And that was those 4 jhanas. And if you ever look at those suttas, if you ever look at them before they have been translated into English, look at them in the original Pali, they mention jhanas so often that they use there in the suttas ... or sometimes they put PE, which is payala, which means just etc. Because it's a safe space. They kept on saying it again and 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 again. That's how much they are quoted in the suttas and in the Vinaya too. But then how did those jhanas, how do you get into those jhanas? A lot of times, seeing the other factors of the Eightfold Path. Jhana was factor number 8. And it is true that you can start wherever you want on those Eightfold Path, but eventually there's some suttas say that first of those factors, which is really perfected, will be number 1, the right view. And sometimes, we sort of pass that by. If your understanding of the Dhamma is pretty accurate, it's much easier to get into these things called jhanas. What particular part of the right understanding do you need to really grasp and understand? One of them is anatta, non-self, not me, not mine, not a self. So your whole job is not to attain things that would actually emphasize your sense of self. like your achievements. Apparently you are, Nordy, what time are you going to go to the cave? On Saturday morning, is it? Saturday afternoon, 1:30. Anybody who wishes to have a visit to, my cave where I usually hang out. If you go into that cave, you'll find there is no certificates over there. There's no certificates of when you got this or got that. Have you ever seen any meditation monks and nuns have certificates, signed when the first time it was you got a first jhana, when you first got nimittas, when you first became a stream winner, when you first became a once return? Do you have certificates there? No one ever has certificates. If you see a certificate there, you know they're a very dodgy monk or nun. We don't have certificates. It's how much we can lose, not how much we can gain. And so because of that, that's one of the reasons why. How did the Buddha enter the jhana? First of all, the first time Siddhartha Gautama entered jhana, he was still a layperson. But remember, how can a layperson, just as a kid, get into one of those jhanas? How did the novice get into the jhana? When's the Buddha going to stop? When's the Buddha going to stop? And then that little novice monk, I'm getting that confused. That's how the novice with Ajahn Chah first got into a deep meditation. When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? When is Ajahn Chah going to stop? I did tell that story already, didn't I? Yeah. And how he got into the jhana, when am I going to stop? So he could stop. That's all. And how did so many other stories of how a monk or a nun, a lay person practicing, and sometimes I call it like hitting the letting go button, pressing it. There's a few people which I've met over these years that they're incredible. Sometimes they're having a lot of suffering in their life. Remember this lady over in Rockingham? And when I started talking about these jhanas and she was listening, she was amazed. She said, yeah, that's what I had years ago. And it was almost like a fluke that she got into a jhana this time. But when I talked to her, yes, that was it. She only got into them once. I'm not quite sure what happened to her afterwards. But she did kind of press the letting go button. Having a lot of trouble and difficulty in her life, she just had to let go. So a lot of time, how you enter those jhanas is quite understandable how you enter them. You have to somehow tease yourself or trick yourself or teach yourself how to let go. That's one of the reasons why a few of you have been asking me, in the interviews, the causes of entering a jhana. And I remember I just told one of you this afternoon, that's why I remember it. I said, how you enter a jhana: be content and easily satisfied, not proud and demanding in nature. If you're content and easily satisfied, not proud and demanding in nature, you will keep those precepts. But this is like the essential right view. You're not trying to attain something. You're trying to let things go. Another example, how you get into jhanas. This is a very hard instruction, but some of you manage to do it. To be relaxed to the max. Sometimes when I say these things, people think, oh, that's just a joke. These aren't jokes. Relaxing to the max. To the max is really important. Relaxing the body and then relaxing the mind. And everything gets just still and easy. And you have to also, I'd add something else to that, to be patient. Being a meditator is like growing a garden. You can't say, I want the flowers to grow now. You know that teacher, Nai Bunman, I remember him telling the story when he was a kid in Thailand, that his father gave him some seeds. So he's only a kid, he planted them in the garden, and now what do I do? And his father said, water them. So he'd water them every day. Nothing was happening. So he thought they died. So he asked his father, and the father said, you've got to be patient. They're growing, but they just haven't pushed the first bit of greenery above the soil yet. And it was true. A couple of days later, you could see just a little bit of green above the soil. And that made him so encouraged. You know what it's like when things start to happen in your meditation? You say, yeah, it's working, working. But then you look, it's Wednesday. I've only got a few more days. So you know what he did? He decided to water them twice a day. And you could see them growing and growing and growing. But he was only a kid, and that's when he lost his patience. He decided to stretch them to make them grow quicker. And they all died. That's why a bit of patience is really important. It doesn't matter just, how much time you have. You've got to give this practice time. And then after a while, so the plants grow. And when they grow, they emerge. The beautiful jhanas. Nimittas before them, all this stuff. At what level of jhanas was he at the time he was only eating a grain of rice before the shepherd offered him food? At that time, I don't think the Buddha, now sort of a monk, had any jhanas. He had a memory of jhanas when he was a kid, but he was just eating food, relaxing, to getting back into a healthy state. And it was only after he had eaten that food and sat under the Bodhi tree, only after that did the jhanas happen. Is jhana 1 equivalent to stream enterer? No. Jhana 2? No. Jhana 3? No. Jhana 4? No. They're not equivalent. That's why, if you look at the 4 jhanas, they are in the Noble Eightfold Path. They are not those attainments, they are the path to them. The path is not the attainments, not the what happens. You walk the path and it's going to get there. That makes sense? And you don't always have to think, oh, I need jhana 4 before I become a stream winner. Even jhana 1 can be sufficient. But you can't attain any of these. This is actually a controversial thing in the suttas. I've talked with many monks, and we're all of the idea to be a stream winner. Not just on the path, but you've actually got that goal. You have to have experience of jhana. And the reason why is that it's only, if you know what jhana is, you have to have that strength of mind, that all those 5 hindrances have disappeared. That's one of the things which the jhanas do. Abolishes the 5 hindrances for a while. That's one of the reasons why I can tell if any of you had a jhana and just come out of it. No hindrances there at all. Okay, because sometimes you forget, some of the tricks which I do, teacher's tricks, you may come up and tell me, you just had a jhana. And I look and say, nah. And I'll say, No, does anyone born in Sri Lanka can't get jhanas these days. And I do something which sounds racist, misogynist, or anything to try and upset you. And if you look at me and say, Ajahn Brahm, I'm amazed and surprised that you talk like that. I say, okay, yeah, it wasn't a jhana. It's my test for you. Because if you just come out of a jhana, you can't get upset or angry at all. It's impossible. So if you are getting angry, that's a very clear test. And sometimes, you may think, oh yeah, I know Ajahn Brahm's tests. And then I will tell your partner, go and tell her it's impossible for her. I've been looking at her, it's impossible. You may not get upset at me, but your partner, oh yeah. And that's a good test, because it's so kind of blissed out. You just, the afterglow even is so wonderful. And you're, oh yeah, fair enough, okay. You can't get upset. And so these things, the jhanas aren't equivalent to any of the 4 stages of enlightenment, but they lead to them. It's a path towards them. You keep doing the jhanas, and then these stages happen. So what happened to Devadatta? He was supposed to have experienced these jhanas, had psychic powers. Was he a stream winner? A once returner? A non-returner? An arhat? No, he was not at all. What went wrong? He was on the path almost to the goal, but that's when pride came in. The very fact he had some pride, he wanted to be the boss. He wanted to take over the Sangha. That was actually saying he hadn't abandoned totally the sense of self. Stream winning hadn't been penetrated. It's kind of strange. He had all of the jhanas there, but he didn't have the total right view yet. It's just slightly perverted. Just that slight amount, the sense of self, was still there. Do you understand that? Anyway, feedback. I enjoy the stories from the sutras and hearing about inspiring disciples of the Buddha. I just read the 32 or 34 marks of a good man. The Buddha was a strange-looking character. I would have ordained too if I saw him. Those marks of a great man, they do really confuse many, many people. Because as well as saying they had the marks of a great man, would you have recognized someone looking like that? Why was it the case that some of the other stories in the sutras just totally contradict that? One of those stories, one of my favorites, that later on in the Buddha's life, that there was one of his students, one of his monks who had become enlightened, went over to the west coast of India to teach. He was very successful. And one of his disciples, after he had his basic training, he decided, as you would do, let's go and travel to see the Buddha. My teacher's teacher. And the Buddha was still alive. So this monk, the only way to get from the west coast of India to the Ganges Valley, unfortunately Singapore Airlines or Air India weren't in operation yet, nor was the railway. He had to walk. So as he was walking, eventually by stage, eventually he came close to the top of the Ganges Valley. I think this was happened. And when he arrived at what they usually do, they would ask somebody, he said, okay, if I can stay in your workshop overnight. And this was a Buddhist. He said, of course you can. There's no one staying in there right now. And so the owner of the place made sure he arranged a nice bedding, for this monk just to stay overnight. And after he arrived, then another monk arrived. And the other monk said the same. He said, okay, if I can stay here overnight. He's also on a journey. So these two monks, they didn't know each other. They were staying in the same workshop just overnight. And even before talking to one another, the first monk who arrived from the west coast of India, he started meditating. And so did the second monk as well. And the first monk was meditating, and he opened his eyes and saw this new monk was meditating too, so he thought he'd carry on meditating. They inspired one another. And then when the meditation was finished, the second monk who arrived and said to the first monk, you're a good meditator. You've been sitting there quite still for quite many hours. Where are you from? And he said, I come from the west coast of India. My teacher is this famous disciple of the Buddha. I said, well, you meditate really good. And then the first monk who arrived from the west coast asked the second monk who arrived, who's your teacher? And the second monk said, I don't have a teacher. I'm the Buddha. And that first monk who arrived bowed and said, I'm sorry, I never noticed, I never knew you were the Buddha who just came to meditate with me. And that's a typical story, of how the Buddha looked. Unrecognizable. No one knew who the Buddha was. And there's many other stories like that. Even when when King Ajatasattu went to go and see the Buddha in the bamboo grove, it's a Manipala Sutta. It's a second sutta in the Digha Nikaya. Yeah, okay. Please. It's right, isn't it? Yeah. So it was the Ajatasattu's kind of doctor, Jivaka, took him there. And this story is kind of important. You may not know its relevance yet, but I'll say something about it afterwards. He took the king, the new king, in a chariot, in a vehicle, as far as the vehicles could go. And then he said, the vehicle can't go any further. The bamboo grove monastery is over there. So we have to get out and walk. So the two of them walked, and you could see the hall. And so they walked very close to the hall. And then Jivaka said, now you have to take off our sandals, our shoes. Even though you're the king, you have to take them off so we can enter the hall. And that's what they did. And when they entered the hall, that's when Ajatasattu said, which one is the Buddha? That was the important thing. You couldn't recognize the Buddha by what he looked like. And Jivaka, who knew the Buddha very well, was a very good disciple, said, the one over there, leaning against a pillar facing east. Everyone else was facing the opposite direction to look at him and listen to his teachings. That was another important description, that no one could distinguish the Buddha as looking different than anybody else. And the idea to say he was huge or he had amazing features on him was a bit strange. I think that those things, you can ask Ajahn Brahm as well, that many of those descriptions came afterwards, what they call in the English language, hagiography. If you have a teacher, you will always emphasize that some of what he says as being special. I have to be very careful of that, because sometimes I'm getting more and more well known, and some of you exaggerate. He must have needed to scratch his nose. There's a purpose to that. In other words, people emphasize that they should never do that. And one of the ways they emphasized the Buddha was how he looked. The Buddha looked like an ordinary monk. Maybe a little bit bigger. He was of the Kshatriya class. But he looked indistinguishable. You can't notice him by any signs he had on him. Not better, not worse, not the same. You won't have any signs on you. You're just a monk. So anyway, that's... Come on, Ajahn Brahm, it's only the first question. I don't get into this. Okay, I think that's enough. George says that Buddha was a strange-looking character. If you saw him, you wouldn't notice that was a special Buddha. And number two, that when I was saying about the little story of going to the bamboo grove and the hall there where the Buddha was teaching that evening, you go in the chariot as far as a chariot can go. Just like each one of you coming here, you came from so many different cities around the world. You came in usually an aircraft as far as aircraft can take you, but you can't land the aircraft in this hall. And you get out of the aircraft and you just get in a taxi or a bus or something to get to Serpentine. But you can't take even the bus, into this hall. You park the car or whatever in the car park, then you have to walk. And you walk, to the front of this building, you've got to take your shoes off. And then you walk barefoot into the hall. Breath meditation. You do breath meditation as far as breath can take you. Then you have to let it go. And then to go in the next stage, you have to let the breath, it's like taking your shoes off before you enter the hall. You let the breath go, and you get into these beautiful nimittas. And then you take the nimittas as far as they can take you to the entrance to the hall. You leave them outside the door, and you go into the jhanas. And then you take the jhanas as far as they can take you, and then you get the great big insights. Every part of these meditation practices, they take you deeper, but you have to let them go. You can't take them all the way into Nibbana. They cease. They're empty. Nothing more needed. Make sense? Anyway. Okay, but anyway, those are the marks of a Buddha. People didn't notice it was a Buddha. Dear Ajahn Brahm, please could you share your thoughts of eating meat, fish and eggs in the context of factory farming? As we know, there is not one moment of kindness shown to these animals during their short and miserable lives, and certainly not when they are slaughtered. Also, not forgetting the effect all this has on the global warming, etc. Your thoughts and advice are very much appreciated. Thank you. Why don't you go and ask the chicken? Sometimes people do exaggerate. I remember what was it? It was there's enough people who might know this gentleman, John Chan. John Chan, he was kind of a developer, a builder, running Finbar. I mention him with great respect because he was also the one who arranged some of the finances for building this retreat center. A very good Buddhist. and giving a lot of contacts of, who is a good architect, especially to do the legalities of this retreat center and all the stuff for the disability laws. So people who are not well can actually come into here. And I remember he even just told me about the builder, who was going to build this. He was a good friend of his. And I do remember, I don't know if you've noticed, to see the windows up there? On 3 sides, they're always closed. They've got shutters over them. On the back, it's open. You know why those shutters are there? Bushfire safety. Because it's not just bushfire safety. Any sunlight would come in through those 3 layers of windows. The back one, which is always clear, that's the one which faces south. You don't get sunlight through there. Sun comes this side, that side, and that side. So during the summertime, basically it protects us from a bushfire. But not just that. I got frustrated by the disciples who used to say they were meditating and they saw this beautiful light come into their meditation, but it wasn't limited, it must have been sunlight. You can't see any sunlight in this room except what's coming from the southern horizon, and we're in the southern hemisphere, which means that it doesn't come in here. If you see a beautiful light in here, it's not sunlight. And that was kind of so important for me to convince you all. They said, it must have been a headlight from a car. No car flies through the air. It must have been a flashlight. How many of you got flashlights here? Basically, yeah, but not, they were shining outside maybe, but not in here. Better not. So all of these, even designs, were there to try and make sure that when people do see beautiful lights in their mind, it can't be anything else. It is a nimitta. And so because of that, that's one of the reasons why, we try and make it easy for people. But anyway, that was with John Chan. I remember he used to take me to do the blessing ceremonies whenever he did any developments over in Perth. And the reason he did that, apparently, he told me, it's actually not him, but I remember meeting his accountant, the guy in charge of all the accounts in this big company he had. And the accountant said, look, I'm a Catholic, he said, but I've noticed every time that my boss, Mr. Chan, invites you to bless the site, there are never any problems. So that's why, here's a check. He used to give me a check for the Buddhist Society of Western Australia for doing all these blessings. And that's why we raised a lot of money here, to be able to build this place. And he said, here's a check. Because if it's a check, as a Buddhist monk, you could receive a check because it wasn't made out to you, and nothing I could do with it. It's just like a piece of paper. So I would give it into town, into the committee, and they would bank it and stuff like that. And this was a Catholic telling me all of this. And he said, I'm very happy to do this because it keeps me in business as well. I got a job. So for some reason or another, I keep on saying this, heavenly beings, if you're nice to them, they look after you. So that's how we built this place. And I still remember he was very happy when you explained why we're building it this way and not other way. Why we're building it every person. Sometimes, how many times when you need to go to the toilet you have to queue up? That's not good for meditation. Sometimes when your own room, you have some peace and quiet and silence. But I remember the builder, who's this guy called anyway, he was quite controversial. I'm not going to tell his name, maybe. But anyway, that once they decided, I invited them. You built this place. Why don't you come over here and give it a try? And so they actually joined one of my 9-day retreats. And remember John, whoever was organising the retreat at that time, they gave him one of the tasks to do, to clean the toilets. And that was just not very helpful. And he told me he never cleaned a toilet in his life. He was a rich dude. And he always had other people do that job for him. And it was so kind of difficult for him. He was also not ready for meditation, not meditation day after day after day. And so he was so restless, he left after about 3 days. I thought, it's such a shame. Just stay a little bit longer. You know, if I was giving out the duties, I would say, no, you can do something else. Just, you know, some people have got the very nice duty of offering tea and coffee to the monks. That's a really cool job. You don't get any stress that way. So I remember that anyway. So that's one of the reasons why when I was blessing one of the sites which he had, he was building a big sort of high-rise development there. And it was a place of, in Leech Highway, of a chicken farm. A chicken farm where they did the production of eggs. And I remember talking to the former owner of the chicken farm, and he said, you know, that the chickens are much safer. You know, when they have, you know, little places they can stay at night, rather than just being able just to wander over the open areas. And he almost swore to me that they are much happier like that. And sometimes I kind of said, that can't be right. That's what he said to me. Sometimes, if we're not a chicken, sometimes we apply human values, our values onto them. Where would you like to live? In a place you can sleep safely at night? Or to be free to wander wherever you wish? Have you all got rooms on this retreat? So you're caged. Okay, this is one of my favourite stories. I got this from one of the brilliant monks over in Thailand. There were these two monks, they were waiting to do a ceremony in somebody's house. And when they were waiting there was an aquarium. Many people have aquariums in their houses. And one of the monks said, that's really bad. You know, putting fish in like a jail. Surely those fish should be released so they can swim freely wherever they want to go in nature. What bad act has those fish done to be put inside this fish tank? You can kind of see his logic. But the other monk said, no. Those fish in the fish tank are far happier. Number one, have you ever seen in a fish tank in somebody's house a person with a rod and a stick and a string coming down fishing in somebody's fish tank? Imagine what it must be like to be a fish. Sometimes you're swimming about in the rivers or the lake and you see a nice little worm or something, or a fly or something, and you think, that looks delicious, and you go and crunch on it, you get taken out, and that's the last you ever live. People are always fishing. But if you're in a fish tank, You can eat whatever you like there. It's safe food. I sometimes wonder what it's like to be a fish. They must have so much fear when they're eating. They must have really bad indigestion. Another fish, they see many of their friends chew on a really good worm and get taken out of their life forever. So that's number one. Number two, have you ever seen fish who run out of water in droughts or have too much water in a flood and they got sent all over the place? That never happens in somebody's fish tank at a house. They've got a constant supply, but not too much, not too little, of water. Number three, that water in a fish tank is kept at a constant temperature. They never feel cold. How many of you complain it's too cold in the morning here some days, and other days it's too hot? That never happens to fish in a fish tank. It's like living in an air-conditioned apartment, nice and comfortable all year round. Number four, those fish, if they ever get sick, do you have health cover? The fish have health cover. Their owner just makes sure that they get checked out, that there's enough health cover for them. So throughout the whole year, if ever any sign of sickness, they get an expert to come in. You don't even have to go to hospital. The fish actually get treated right there in the tank. Number, I forgot now. Which number? 5, okay. Next one. Those fish in the tank, they get the best food. Not too much, not too little. They never run out of food. The person in the tank always sprinkles some of the fish food in there. And also in a fish tank, no one ever puts fish which eat one another in a fish tank. All the fish in those tanks only have fish next to them which are friends. So they don't have any fear of being eaten or attacked by bigger fish. So all those fish in a tank, they have nothing to worry about. No fear, plenty of food, health care, air conditioning. Would you like to be a fish in the rivers or lakes, or a fish in somebody's fish tank? It's certainly much safer. So he said, those fish who are in the fish tank are very lucky. They've had some good karma there. So sometimes we check our values. Excellent. Okay, next question we got here. Dear Ajahn, dependent origination to the Arahat question. Okay, Vedana Danha, craving. Sometimes craving, what does craving actually mean? In English, it's an intense form of wanting. So these days, I never actually translate Danha as craving. I just use a softer version of wanting. And that makes, every time we mention the word wanting instead of craving, it makes it far more powerful to listen to. We're not talking about craving, which is a powerful wanting, even ordinary wantings, small amounts of wanting. And what do I call Vedana? Is actually, I would argue, it is a powerful word, but calling it feeling distorts it. I call it experience. It's what we experience through our senses. That's Vedana. Is the link broken here for the Arahat between Vedana and craving? No. You look at what the Buddha said. That what's broken in dependent origination is when avijja, delusion, is abandoned. When delusion disappears, then dependent origination. Or I should say, instead of dependent origination, dependent cessation. I don't know why too many people always just see only one side of a dependent of this causality. It's dependent origination, dependent cessation. So we're talking about when the dependent, these links go into cessation mode, is when avijja is seen. And so the avijja is not there anymore. What does avijja mean?
Ignorance.
Sorry?
Ignorance.
Thank you for that, but that's wrong. Ignorance means you haven't heard anything yet. Instead of ignorance, make it even more accurate, it's called delusion. You're seeing something, you're hearing it, smelling, tasting, touching, or knowing it, and you get it wrong. There's many, many people who know the Four Noble Truths. Do you know what the Four Noble Truths are? No, you don't. You can recite it. You can tell me the first is this, the second is that. If you really knew it, then you'd be totally enlightened. This is one of the things which the Buddha said, which kind of, I read it again and read it again and read it again. He said, people think they know. They've studied. They've got PhDs. Do they really know? If they did, you can see that they're fully enlightened, jhanas are no problem at all, and no worries, no anger, no ill will. So this is how you know that just knowing is not enough. It's actually understanding. That's breaking delusion. So many times in life, I remember seeing this as like a scientist, you think you know. It makes sense to you, but you're missing something. And because you miss that something, the things go wrong. So, when avijja is seen through, that is when the process called dependent origination cessation starts to unwind. When avijja is seen through, then the sankharas are seen through. The sankharas are just these, sometimes they call it karma formations, other times the Buddha calls it will. Will is seen through. A lot of people just don't even get there. They always think their will is coming from them. It's not. It's coming from conditioning. So from the seeing through delusion, getting insight, then you can be still. You know the will is not yours, so you can leave it alone. And many more things happening. Am I discombobulating you? Maybe I am. I'll just leave it there for the time being. Oh, crikey, how many questions here? Can you please elaborate on how to form right view? Oh, that actually mixed with this one, this last question. How to form right view is actually to get so still, you've got more data. Okay, this is a simile which just comes to mind. The simile of the tadpole and the lake. How can a tadpole, born in water, grew up in water, know what water is? It doesn't know what water is no more than a fish does. It's always there for you. Even if that tadpole becomes a very smart little tadpole, and she goes to school, does really well in chemistry, and she goes to university in the pool, and she majors in hydrology. She becomes an expert in water, its uses and its nature. And even when that pool or pond is in a retreat center like this, sometimes that tadpole has the opportunity of listening to great nuns talk about the Abhidhamma on what water is. So this little tadpole becomes the expert on water in the whole of Jhana growth. Does the tadpole really understand water? But then one day, little tadpole starts to grow appendages on her body. Grows little hands, or rather arms and legs. She's transforming into a frog. And one day, little tadpole, for the first time in her existence, doesn't know what she's doing, jumps out of the lake, out of the pond, and is standing on dry ground. Imagine what that must feel like for a little tadpole, now a frog. She's got new data, new experience, which she's never had anything like that before in her life. Now she has the opportunity to know what dry land is. No matter how many books she reads, how many talks she listens to, will never understand dry land if she hasn't actually left it for a little while. And that's a brilliant simile for how insight works. After a while, you come to places like this, and after a while, I kind of trick you, I admit that, into getting into a jhana. Encourage you, give you all the tips, and sometimes it happens, it has to. And when you come out, when you're inside that jhana, that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to explain it to yourself. Wow, that was amazing. When you come out, but can you really describe it? Even those of you I've given interviews to, and you're trying to describe what a nimitta is, what actually happens, what the colours are, and just, what happens with it. It's so difficult to explain, simply because you're trained in the language of this world. You say what a sort of a desert is, what a tree is, or what a river is. Yeah, we all know that, and we've developed a language for that in schools. But how many of your teachers in schools or university have told you how to describe nimittas? And that's just the beginning. Now, jhanas, goodness gracious. So anyway, you have your own experiences of these now, and they're real. And one of the mistakes, or one of the things which just delays people's understanding of what these jhanas are, we always ask ourselves, what was that? Please, if you have a deep experience in meditation, don't ask yourself what was there. Ask yourself what was missing. That's a much better path to getting your understanding without wasting too much time. And one of the things which is missing, even in the first jhana, like one of the things which is missing from the frog, is now crouching on dry land, is water. Now that frog has a chance to understand through personal experience what water is and what no water is. Water has disappeared. In the first jhana, you have an opportunity to understand what those five senses are. They've disappeared, they've vanished. Even like doctors, sometimes they think they understand what a body is. They've been trained, but they haven't had the experience of the body vanishing. And not just the five senses, But in that first jhana you have the opportunity to understand, so not just the body, but the five senses. What are these five senses? Why are they? Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. As one monk put it, this body is like the playground for these five senses. And then you take the body around the earth, basically exploring mostly the pleasures of the five senses. I debate that point. And then, I always like using that simile for the second jhana. That's what disappears in the second jhana. You're blissing out in the first, why bother with the second jhana? You've got enough bliss. In the second jhana, something else disappears. And I always say that's far more radical. In the second jhana, what disappears is the will. The ability to control, to do, to choose. That's gone. Temporarily, but it's gone for long enough you've never experienced anything like that before. That's not scary, that's blissful. We always feel that this will, choice, is kind of one of the things we should cherish. And sometimes if people try to take away our ability to choose, they're not really taking it away. We feel they are, and you feel you need to protest. You need to reassert your freedom to choose. And here, the will is totally gone, vanished. And you're so safe, so peaceful, so free. And you know now why the Buddha said, you are not the one who does. You're not even the one who knows. All those things, you see, as the jhanas progress, you lose more. The whole process of jhanas and any immaterial states are a process of just losing more and more and more and more. And see how much more freedom, bliss, peace you have, the less you have. You may hear me saying that and say, oh yeah, that's just a monk. I've got other ways of dealing with my life. But it's more than that. You're starting to understand what freedom is. The more you have and possess and guard, the more you're a prisoner. Do you want to be free? This is what happens. It's not just believing in ideas. These real experiences of what's happening in life, so many things disappear in the jhanas. That's one of the reasons why you learn so much. It's not theory anymore. It's experience. And so as you develop more meditation, the right view just develops too. There's such powerful experiences. When you come out of them, then you can't forget them. Changes much of the way you look at life. Actually changes everything. Rebirth. How many of you have a really strong understanding and know it's just rebirth is just what happens? A lot of people these days, no, they don't. Sometimes they ask me, so how can you believe in rebirth? You haven't died yet. When you go into a deep meditation, it's like death. Your body vanishes. But my body. The five senses disappear. What other time do you know the five senses stop? And not just the five senses, but even the body kind of gets very still. Death, do not sleep, you dream. Your body is still there. I always say that's like the cat. Sometimes you look at a cat, it looks like it's sleeping. But there's still a part of its senses are still active. And if a little mice comes past, it does that just so quickly. It's not like its senses have been turned on. It's part of those senses is still kind of active, sensing the surroundings. And even when you sleep, do you really disappear? Many times you're dreaming. Many times if somebody touches you, you feel it straight away. You haven't really gone unconscious. Close, but not really. But in these jhanas you do. Totally. Okay, I'll give you an example. There's Greg. And when I mention his name, it's many years ago now, I don't mind mentioning his name because I won't embarrass him. One Sunday afternoon in Perth, he told his wife there's nothing on TV, so he went into his bedroom to do some meditation while his wife watched something else on the TV. I don't see why anyone can ever say that, there's nothing on the TV. It's like looking in the refrigerator, there's nothing in the refrigerator. There's heaps of food, it's nothing which you like. So he went into his room to do some meditation, and he usually meditated for 30 minutes, 40 minutes at most at that time. And when he hadn't come out of his room yet, the bedroom, after about an hour, his wife went to check on him. And that's when she freaked out. He wasn't breathing. He was just still sitting. He never meditated that long before. There's no breath. He checked him carefully. He wasn't breathing. It was like he was dead. So she rang the ambulance. 000 in Perth. Please don't do that here. Please check. That husband, or unless you really don't like him. No, don't do that, that's not right. If he's still warm, he's not dead. That's how you check. And so, she didn't know about that, so she just called the ambulance. Medics came, checked him, and they couldn't see any signs of life. So they put him in the back of the ambulance, full speed, sirens wailing. Please excuse me for doing this. Actually, ambulances don't sound like this, but this is the only thing I can do. And by the time they got to this is not a joke, this is actually real. By the time they got to the hospital, it was a very, very short time, Sunday afternoon, and they were close by. When they got to the hospital, the triage people checked him out, could see no sign of life. They put him into the emergency room. The good fortune of this occasion was the doctor on duty that afternoon assigned to him. His parents had migrated to Perth from India, and he'd always heard that when people meditate in India, some of these sadhus, they could actually stop their bodily functions. This is what this guy had been doing. He'd been meditating, so his wife said. And this Indian doctor could see no sign of life. So what the Indian doctor did, instead of sending him straight down to the morgue, which was also a good choice, not sending him down there, imagine when he came out of his meditation, he'd have killed the other two morgue attendants. It was shock. And anyway, the doctor noticed he was still warm, which was weird. He didn't realize at the time that was what was important, showed he wasn't dead yet. So he put defibrillators on his body. These are those electric shocks they put on the body to try and get you going again. I know when I first told that story, it was actually a few years after the event, and somebody said they don't do that when a person has no signs of life anymore. They put adrenaline injections to try and get him sort of shook up a bit to get his heart going. But this one they put electric shocks on. Many times, I've seen videos of this kind of almost like electrocuting you, jumping off your bed. Many times they did that, nothing worked. And his wife was there by the bedside. She was the one who gave all this information. Many times they tried to get him alive, nothing worked. Until, I don't know how long, an hour or so, that he decided to come out of his meditation. Then beep, beep, beep. All of the machines were working perfectly then. And this Indian doctor, couldn't believe it. The wife was amazed. He was still alive. And gave him a thorough investigation and said, nothing wrong with you. Can't find any faults in his body, so you might as well go home. And they never even gave him a lift home. He walked home with his wife. And I remember asking him, was there anything unpleasant about that experience? Anything unpleasant at all? He said yes. The only unpleasant thing was the scolding he got from his wife on the way home. Don't you ever do that again, Greg. He always scared me, cooked me. But everything else was totally beautiful, peaceful, great experience. This is what happens, what it's like when you get into these deep meditations. It can be regarded as so similar to the death experience. That's why I say it's a very beautiful learning experience of what death is, what it feels like, without really dying. I call these classes on deep meditation Dying 101. You never afraid anymore. Sickness and death. Of dying, yes, dying is painful, but death is usually very beautiful. Just let go. I don't know if I'm convincing you. But please, don't die here. Wait till you get home, otherwise I'll get in trouble. According to the Bhikkhu Vinaya, is there a way to prevent a monastic intentionally misinterpreting and teach incorrect Dhamma? Yes, but it has to be very, very obviously wrong. Because sometimes, people have different experiences. And in these current days, a teacher, teaches many, many people. And sometimes if there is any disagreement in what the Buddha said, you can actually go to the suttas, the Vinaya, and show them. But usually what most people show each other is translations. So you've heard me say many times that it's wrong to call samadhi concentration. Many people say, no, it means concentration. I can put all the arguments you like from the suttas. It can never mean concentration. Citing other texts in the suttas or in the Vinaya. One of those, because we were doing the Patimokkha chanting yesterday, one of those is what we call the last 7 rules of the Patimokkha, the 7 adhikarana samatha. The 227 rules for the monks, the last 7 are the 7 adhikarana, which means business to be done. Samatha means settling them, not concentrating them. It's the same word. Samatha is what you do to create samadhi. And what that means is all the business you have to do, such as like ordination procedures, or as a dispute, and finding out how we can settle that dispute. And all those different types of things which you have to do as a community of monks is called adhikarana, the business, samatha, not to concentrate it, but to settle it. To settle it so it no longer exists. The problem has been solved, and let it go. I like quoting that, because it's the same word, used in a totally different context. which makes it quite clear what its meaning really is. So you don't concentrate, business to be done. I know you chanted the Patimokkha last night, Venerable Vasaga. Thank you.
It's Venerable Sunya.
Sri Sunya. Oh, so you were checking it. Okay, you were helping. Okay.
Who's complicit?
You're complicit. Okay, that's good. But you also do chant the Patimokkha.
Yeah.
Do you actually concentrate the Patimokkha to chant it?
I don't really concentrate on it, I guess.
No, you don't. You settle the business. Get it done. So that's, you have all these arguments, but then the best argument is to experience what a jhana is like. And the idea of concentration is just not there. Stillness, silence, settling is there. Make it so peaceful, so nothing moves. You're still. Also, but the trouble is, it's almost impossible to argue with somebody who's a teacher themselves. Because, I can understand that, because many people can listen to what I say, and if I give you a wrong teaching, and you'd feel you're letting people down, you feel I shouldn't have started being a teacher unless I know what I'm talking about. That's why you have to know what you're talking about first. Then you can teach. But many times there are monks and nuns, they don't fully know what they're talking about. They still teach. And because of that, you get many sort of wrong teachers. Also, if a monk was traveling and was very thirsty, could he ask a layperson to offer him water to drink? Oh yeah. You don't even need to ask them to offer you water. Water does not need to be offered to you. If you see some, like a tap, and you're really thirsty, you can always open that tap and drink it yourself. When I want a glass of water over in the teacher's cottage, I just turn on the tap. If I want a cup of tea, I've got to make sure the tea bag was offered. But water, that's not rule is not there. You can always have something to drink. Oh my goodness. Okay, how does one approach the meditation when the breath feels uncomfortable? Let it feel uncomfortable. Don't judge it. And after a while it becomes very peaceful. It's just the nature of the breath. So it's when we try and control it, it gets uncomfortable. And you let it be. You could always add a bit of loving kindness towards it. But also, why do you think it's uncomfortable? A lot of times, if you just keep focusing on the present moment, with no future, no past, a lot of time the discomfort disappears. Can we meditate on sound when in a noisy environment? Yes, you can, but you don't get very far. Imagine you go to a rock concert and you meditate. I don't know, who's the latest rock concert? Gurus. Are you really going to get peaceful? I told you when I was young I liked Jimi Hendrix, but I would never meditate to him these days. It really is disturbing. When is a suitable time to do mindfulness on sound and how to do it correctly? The right time to do mindfulness on sound is when it stops. I'm being quite quick now. Got excuse. Ajahn Brahm said, don't go looking for peace. When your heart is ready, it will find you. Pretty much so. You don't go chasing the carrot, it will come to you. What does peace mean in the above context? Does peace mean love or nibbana or serenity? Oh, sorry, I thought you meant like peace which you have with your lunch. The reason I'm telling a few funny stories now is because I was being very serious and lots of time went past and you're getting miserable. Don't go for looking for peace. Peace, like serenity, calm, just whatever it is when things don't move, when there's no noise, when everything settles down. What does peace mean? Sometimes you ask people in town, what does peace mean? They try to make up something, but they never experienced it. When was the last time you experienced really strong peace? Things move, people talk, there's radios, and there's a lot of noise in our world. It's one of the reasons why in Australia it's a beautiful country, because it's so big. You go out away from the towns and the cities, and it's incredibly peaceful. I love that about Australia. Sometimes you could find places of peace in the UK when I was young, but it was difficult. Whenever I found a place of peace, I would always try and go back there as much as possible. And then when people said, just go to the beach was always noisy. Even when there was no people there, the sound of the sea was not peaceful at all. And people got really upset at me when they said, oh, how tranquil it is out here by the beach in remote parts of the shoreline of Australia. No way. But in caves, that was really nice and peaceful. You couldn't hear anything there. Those are my places of peace and silence. No noise at all. Dear Ajahn, you mentioned that jhana arises when their causes are present. What are their causes? When the causes are present, some of those causes, I think I mentioned that answer already. What are the causes? I mentioned that at the beginning of this talk. Be content and easily satisfied. Not proud and demanding in nature. That's enough. Next question. Do you have any advice on techniques for lying down meditation for people with health issues or chronic injuries? Please and thank you. Usually you've already learned how to lie down, even with chronic injuries. That's why many people go to hospital, they stay in beds. So the only advice is, when you are injured, ill, old, or whatever it is happening to you, see if you can find the most comfortable position of your body by asking your body, how are you? Legs. Right leg, do you want to move? And if it says yes, move. You don't try and train your body or discipline your body. You're kind to your body. And just the whole of the body, you just relax it to the max. And when you relax it to the max, that can be some of the most comfortable position you can possibly be in. And then, once you've relaxed to the max, it's good to do that meditation, just maybe just allow the body to disappear. If the body disappears quickly, which often many parts of it do, but don't sleep yet. You're getting to find some peace. Please stay awake enough to enjoy it. So then you can actually get into deep meditations or jhanas and have wonderful meditations. Even though you have health issues. I did tell you about that monk I know who had the scrub typhus. And he was lying in hospital. He managed to get into a jhana. It's possible. Dear Ajahn Brahm, morning talk Anapanasati Sutta. You did part 1, 2 of the sutta. Is there a part 3 or maybe part 4? Yes. You want to hear that one too? Most of part 3 I mentioned, but the part 4 of the Anapanasati Sutta is not where you start looking at the breath. The breath has already vanished by this part. When you come out of the jhanas, which is the 12th stage of anapanasati, then the 13, 14, 15, 16 stages, when you use that data you've had with anapanasati and with jhana, what it's like when things stop, to start using the insights, contemplating what is it like when things disappear, when you have this viraga, dispassion, cessation, letting go. What do those words mean? You've experienced them. And now you can actually not focus on them, but know what they really mean. This is the insight practice. Dear Ajahn Brahm, I was blown away by our bhikkhuni's answers yesterday. Their honesty, intellect and humbleness was amazing. Can you please explain the difference between samatha and anugahita vipassana versus vipassana anugahita samatha? Did you answer that question yesterday? You didn't? Oh yeah, I know. No, they said, Dear Ajahn Bante. Not to Ajahn Brahm.
That question wasn't there yesterday.
Okay, now it's here. What's your answer?
It's actually a good one because sometimes our minds are quite restless. So sometimes it's nice that you can do some reflection. So it's not really the proper vipassana because vipassana requires the hindrances to be gone, but still you can use some dhamma and contemplate, and that can lead the mind into becoming more still, and then that is that vipassana guide samatha, right? And then the opposite is that you can, if your mind is already peaceful, you can actually become still, and then the vipassana practice. I mean, in a very short way, that's
Excellent.
I have understood.
Okay, thank you. One question I don't know how to answer now. Thank you. Can you explain what the Buddha meant by emptiness? Was it? Oh, Majjhima 121. And how we can apply this to contemplations. How the Buddha described emptiness is just you recognize what this is empty of. So it's like a relative emptiness. So what is this room empty of? This room here. Many of the auditoriums you've ever been into, here is empty of, even you can start with like many seats. Don't just look at where there's people and objects. Look at what's between those objects. What's between those people. What this is empty of. Not what is destroying this emptiness. And then when that physical perception of emptiness is started to be observed, then also, why do people want to fill up the emptiness, to destroy it? What would you like to put in this room? And it's empty of those things. And when you close your eyes, why do you want things? Why does desire come up? It's actually to destroy emptiness. And after a while, you kind of keep on perceiving. When you get into a nice meditation, you close your eyes. My mind is now empty of all those visual objects. My mind is empty of the past and the future. Your mind gets deeper into emptiness, empty of craving, empty of the other hindrances. When it gets empty of all those things, that perception of emptiness, not what's there, but what's disappeared, and how powerful that emptiness can be and how it can develop. It's empty of things which have always been there and now are no longer there. Like I said, like the will. You can see things disappearing, you can let them disappearing. Why? Because you realize you don't own them, they're not yours. And that's how you can develop emptiness. So it goes way, 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 way deeper than you ever expected. If that's a bit much for you, it gives you scary ideas. I always remember just when I was a student, I was actually doing like a gap year. I was only just turned 18. I went down to Central America and climbed those great pyramids in the jungle. And when you got to the top of the pyramid, I never knew why they were there, from the Mayan civilization. When you got to the top of that pyramid, there's a couple of things which I noticed was just so obvious. One of them, you could actually see the horizon. When you travel in the jungle, your vision is limited. You can only see to the next tree or the next bush. And even if you turn your head up to look at what's above the roots of your journey, the route is always winding. And the jungle regrows so quickly, it always is overgrown. You're like going through tunnels all the time. You never see the horizon. And when I climbed up one of those pyramids, because there was no one to stop me. When I went to one of these places, Tikal, in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle, there was only one other archaeologist was there. He was too busy to bother about me. And I just walked up by myself at one of these great pyramids. And when you got up to the top, I'm glad it was a personal experience rather than reading about it in a book. You were above the tree line. Because you're above the tree line, number one, the air was so much clearer and cleaner and cooler than in the jungle. And number two, you could see forever. You could see the horizon in every direction. And, as I say, there was nothing between you and infinity, whichever way you looked. I kind of appreciate that as a religious experience. You didn't need a priest or a book to tell you what's happening. Nothing between you and infinity because of the emptiness surrounding you in all directions. And I always remember that experience, so it becomes an idea of what emptiness really is. It seems like the training you and others got in Thailand was much more brutal and difficult than the way monasteries and retreats are set up here in Australia. No, not always. Anyway, you suggest we be very kind to ourselves, but you are only allowed 4 hours sleep. Where is the middle way for lay people in the modern world? Only allowed 4 hours sleep, but I could never do that. And then I talked with the other monks, and they weren't doing it either. And sometimes I why is Ajahn Chah, who's supposed to be able to read people's minds, doing this? And one of the reasons was, in northeast Thailand at that time, it was a kind of a comfortable existence. And people would, they were okay with that food. They were okay with sleeping outside. They got used to that. They weren't eaten by the mosquitoes. And because they got used to that, they became very lazy. And I say that with the deepest respect. So Ajahn Chah had to push them to get them to meditate. They had a word in Thai called sabai. And he'd often talk to the villagers, how are you? Oh, sabai. Because there's nothing really they needed to do. They actually got lazy. And when you ask Ajahn Chah, why do you teach so toughly to the monks? Just to get them to actually to do something, instead of sleeping all day. Some of those Thai monks, please excuse me, Thai monks, they slept so much. Why? Because they didn't have to do anything else. I remember this, that one of the monks, he was actually from Canada, and I remember him just really sort of practicing hard, just hardly eating, and not sleeping at all, rather like sleeping sitting up. And it was, well, they call them the Dhutanga practices, and he was keeping so many of them at the same time. And then Ajahn Chah came to visit this monastery where he was in, and he had an epileptic fit, the only one he's ever had in his whole life, this monk. When Ajahn Chah saw it, he said, you Westerners coming to Thailand for the first time, and you hear all these rules, and it's because of your upbringing and training, you keep them. And Ajahn Chah never expected his monks to keep all these rules. He would give a few more of them. And an example of that, this monk is still alive. Some of you may have seen him. I respect him enormously. His name is Ajahn Brahm. You remember Ajahn Brahm? He came to visit here many years ago. And this is monks in a forest monastery in Thailand. That there became a little fashion you may call it, when the monks started taking snuff. It was a stimulant. It's not disallowed, but the monks were really getting into it, really overmuch. And so I remember seeing them. They had this little tube. One end was thick, one end was thin. And the idea was you put some of the snuff in the thin end and you blow at the tube so it blows the snuff into your nose. And of course these monks, they were toughies, so they never used the small end. They put all the snuff in the big end and they blew through the small end. A huge amount of snuff went up their nose. And so it got so gross. And then we had a big meeting. And at the meeting, Ajahn Chah said, well, it's just so gross, it's not really necessary, so we're going to ban it. So they all agreed to ban it. And then, as I was going out of the hall, you saw Ajahn Brahm just sitting there, just getting the snuff. And some of the younger Western monks said, well, he's breaking the rules, we just decided on this rule. And then you had to explain, this is the Thai way of doing things in the northeast. You give it up sooner or later, but not now. And some of you may be surprised by that. That's how it worked over there. Kind of weird. But eventually, it got given up. Do you understand that? Don't try and understand the logic behind it, because it bamboozled me. But nevertheless, that's how it worked. Dear Ajahn, I do oil painting as a hobby regularly. When I paint, I concentrate on it singularly. Could painting be a form of meditation for me? If you can paint a picture of emptiness, yes. Could you please explain how ahimsa, non-violence, is achieved in Buddhism with meat eating, involved killing of animals? Sometimes when I was in Thailand, you remember seeing the villagers who were planting the rice. Is rice sort of bad? Does it kill things? You bet it does. That's why you'd always see the birds following the plough. The plough would dig up all of the bugs living in the soil, the beetles, and that's what the birds were following. It's very difficult to be a pure vegetarian. Can it be done? There's always a killing of animals for human beings to live, to survive. Our job is to try and make it the least possible. Dear Ajahn, when I close my eyes I can see light through my eyelids. Is this nimitta? Do I just watch the nimitta instead of my breath? I think I answered that question quite a few times. Yes, if you close your eyes you can see light through your eyelids. Is it seeing it through the eyelids? Does this happen at night time? Is there any light in the room? Or is it really sort of light which is not coming from outside through your eyelids, but which is actually, being created by the samadhi? A lot of times I would say it is a nimitta, but you need to actually ask you many more questions. Dear Ajahn, do we need to enter jhana before being able to see past lives? No, it helps. There's several ways of seeing past lives. One of them is like hypnotic regression. Sometimes it's almost spontaneous memory of past lives when something from this present life triggers these memories. And I think I'm not sure if I mentioned this on this retreat, but there was this, what did I do it the first day? There was this entertainer in UK many years ago called Roy Hudd, Hudd. Do you remember him? No, okay. It was my generation. But anyway, he became quite popular. And then one day he was doing a show over in London, and a new one-way system had been installed in London. He didn't know the way, so he got lost in London, trying to find his way out of this one-way system, and so he could get home. He went down this street, and that's when his life changed. He remembered that street, even though he hadn't been down this street in this life. And when he saw that street, all these memories came back of who he was in a previous life. And he went to this house, knocked on the door, and the owners of that house answered, "You're Roy Hudd, what are you doing here?" He said he used to live there. No way, we lived here for about 40, 50 years. That was before then, he said. And on those many London houses, they have these little plaques on the wall of famous people who lived there before. That was me in my previous life. It was Dan Leno, Leno, probably the most famous musical performer of that generation. And then they let him in the house, and he took them around, showed them all the places which were there. He'd never been in the house before in this life. In his previous life, that's where he used to live. And it was such an important experience, spontaneous memory of the past life, that he started to write about it. He wrote this beautiful article, that's what I read, about just by accident going down the wrong street and all these memories just being triggered. And he published that, and then he got the sack, because the TV company he worked for, the owner of that TV company was a devout Christian. He said, "I don't want anyone like this working in my company." He was getting quite famous at the time, a household name for my generation, and he got booted out. But he didn't mind, because then he started writing all these articles about the life of Dan Leno, famous music hall comedian. And because of that, he made enough money to survive. He was well known already. Now that was an interesting little story. He had more information. He became the expert on this music hall comedian, because you remember all the details of this music hall comedian's life. They're all accurate. That's spontaneous memory of past life. Other times you can get this past life through hypnosis. That's also interesting. when people can do that. And sometimes it surprises you. Remember one of these guys, we've got, Ron Mutton, you know Dennis. He's had lots of really great successes on just finding out, people's problems in this life and what caused them. One of the ones I remember him telling me about, there was this young girl, only 16, anorexic. Nothing was working for her. She was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. If she ate, she vomited it out again. So they decided to give her hypnotic regression, see if it worked. But because she was only 16, they had to have the mother in attendance at the time. So the mother just sitting down, interested in what's happening to her daughter. The hypnotist got her into her previous life. And to cut it short, in her previous life, she was the younger of two sisters. And they both fell in love with the same man. Her older sister was more attractive. She was young, no matter what she did. So the man fell in love with the older sister and married her. And that's why she committed suicide. She was not pretty enough. Wrecked her life. And as she was recounting all of this, with all the names and the details, her mother was, she was going crazy. Her mother was the problem. And so this poor little hypnotist had then to speak to the mother. Why are you reacting so over the top? And that's when the mother told the hypnotist, I was that sister. We never told my daughter this, that before she was born, she had an auntie who committed suicide, because my sister and I both fell in love with the same man. She is now his daughter. I am that man's wife. And all of the stories which he was saying about that experience were totally true. Makes life very complicated. Anyway, did I explain that story clear enough? Okay. It's only 3 minutes past 9. I've got 4 stories. Okay, do it quickly. If there is a danger in ordaining with the intention for it to be temporary, it can be, but it's always had some positive effects to it. Those positive effects are that sometimes people ordain just temporarily. They like it so much, they realize that this is a taste of freedom, and they remain. Many people had the intention of just ordaining temporarily, and that's like me. Only a couple of years, and I'm still going strong. If I told senior monks that was my intention, would they still ordain me? Quite likely. Do we need to enter jhana before being able to see past lives? Oh, you did that one. Yes. Unless you do it through some other means. Dear Ajahn, what is Nisagya Pachitya 14? Oh, that is when that's where you do, the bhikkhuni does sewing on the robe.
I thought it's like
Yeah, quite likely.
something about some kind of like rug or something.
Oh no, it's not the rug one. It's Nisagya Pachitya 14. That's when Upalawana she's got some food for the Buddha, some meat, and then she flew through the air to present it to the Buddha, and it was Udayan, was the gatekeeper while the Buddha was out on alms round. And I think he asked it to be, if it's a gift for the Buddha, it should be properly wrapped up.
Oh, is this for bhikkhuni or bhikkhu?
Bhikkhu, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, okay, I'll check that out for you for tomorrow. Dear Ajahn and organising team, Thank you very much for this wonderful stay. Hope everyone else gets to enjoy this peace. After many years of trying, I got into this retreat. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We ain't finished yet. So now you're in here, please enjoy it to the max. Sorry for taking so long on these questions, but I did want to finish them. Thank you. And you may have noticed I do feel a bit tired, more tired today. And mostly that's not because of the time, it's mostly because of the hay fever. I noticed this last time. When you take some hay fever medicine, even though it's supposed to be non-drowsy, it still takes away some of your energy. But I did see the weather is going to rain again soon. So when it does rain, it washes all the air. It's nice and clean. So thank you for listening. Thank you for persisting. I hope you enjoyed it. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Excellent. Oh boy. What is that? Upalawana.